Diana Ferguson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana. I'm grants management specialist with the Agency of Agriculture, supporting farm to school and a variety of other programs. Pronouns are she, her. Thanks for joining us today.
Wonderful. Great. So let's go ahead and get started. Just as a heads up for this webinar platform, this is automatically when folks join, their video and audio is disabled. And that's for the purpose of the recording. But we will open up for questions later on. And at that point, you can just raise your hand, or you can also type a question in the chat and we can enable your mic so that then you can unmute and speak. We're open to questions throughout the presentation as well, but we do have some dedicated time at the end for Q&A. Just noting as well that this is a recorded webinar. This will get uploaded to YouTube probably by the end of the day today or tomorrow, and we will link it onto our Farm to School grant webpage at that time for your later viewing. The agenda for the webinar today is to first offer an overview of the Vision Grant opportunity. We'll talk a little bit about program history, and then we'll get into the details of the application and the grant itself, talking about eligibility, the different components of the application, grant documentation that's required with the application, match requirement, how applications are scored and reviewed, and we'll also talk about the payment schedule. And then we'll wrap it up with, we'll close up the presentation with a how to apply slide, and also Diana is going to offer a tutorial in WebGrants about how to get in and submit an application in case it's a new system for you. And then at the end, we'll have time and space for questions and answers. But again, feel free to, if the questions come up as we go through, just drop them in the chat or raise your hand and we can address those as we go. So to start with an overview of the Vision Grant opportunity, so the focus of the Vision Grant is to support innovative projects that engage youth in addressing contemporary problems through farm to school and early childhood activities. And I recognize that's a kind of a long-winded explanation for what the grant is focused on, but hopefully these subsequent points can help clarify. So some of the contemporary problems that we're talking about for the focus of this grant are prioritizing projects that will engage youth in addressing climate change, food security, food sovereignty, health and nutrition equity, racial justice, and agricultural workforce development. Projects must center Vermont youth in their scope and promote awareness of and engagement in these issues related to agriculture, nutrition, community, and health. And another really important component of this project, of this grant opportunity, is that proposals have to be scalable and or replicable, and prioritize youth leadership and demonstrate a significant impact on Vermont youth. $150,000 is available to award, and the mid-max award range is $5,000 to $50,000. And the application deadline is Thursday, April 11th. At the end of the day. I will just maybe one other piece of context to offer in this overview here is that the Agency of Agriculture's Farm to School and Early Childhood program has 3 major grant programs, and this is one of the 3. The first 2 happened earlier in the year, and those processes are now closed and award decisions are being made or have been made. So the 3 grant opportunities together are the Capacity Building Grant, the CSA Grant, and the Vision Grant. The Vision Grant is unique in that it kind of is, there's a lot of flexibility in the types of projects that can be addressed. And this emphasis on scalable and replicable projects demonstrates that the focus of this grant is really to try to find where there are like creative efforts that are happening across the state that we can amplify rather than taking like a top-down approach. So it's an exciting grant opportunity, really focused on working in community and supporting youth empowerment. So I just wanted to provide that overview. And if you're interested in learning more about the other two Farm to School grant programs, feel free to visit our website or reach out to me separately. So a little bit more about program history for this grant. So this opportunity was launched in 2021. And the aim is to support these innovative and outside the box projects in the farm to school and early childhood landscape that can be scaled and replicated. So in 2021, which was the first year that this was offered, there was $37,000 available. And so that funding was awarded to South Hero Land Trust. The second year of this process, there was less funding available, but we were still able to make one award, and that was to the Fairfield Community Center Association. And then in 2023, the grant budget for the Agency of Agriculture increased significantly between 2022 and 2023. Previously, the budget for like all of our programs was $200,000, and now the budget for all of our programs is $500,000. So we were able to really grow this vision grant in particular. And so last year, instead of having just one vision grant, we were able to have 5 and then really increase the award cap up to 50,000. So these are the 5 projects that were funded last year. And I'm just offering them here for context because it's such an open-ended opportunity. I think it can be helpful to see what types of projects have been funded in the past. So we funded the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition to launch a sustainable agriculture education program, which is focused on internships, involves mentorship between college and high school students and farmers in the Champlain Valley. Yeah, the Champlain Valley. We also supported the Feast Farm program, which is like a nonprofit farm project of the City of Montpelier Parks and Trees Department, and that engages youth and elderly folks in nutrition security initiatives and agricultural education. This grant program also funded Food Connects last year to make some enhancements to the Harvest of the Month program, which is a statewide farm to school curriculum and local procurement initiative. We also were able to support Shelburne Farms with 2 projects that kind of focused in this area of like community focused projects, community leadership, and one was a youth-led farm to school summit that's going to happen this summer for the second year. And then the other project is a project to launch local procurement pilot projects in a few different early childhood programs and see what lessons learned can be gleaned from these various efforts to bring more local food into early childhood programs. Finally, the last project that this grant program funded last year was the Upper Valley Super Compost Project, focused on Sharon Elementary School. And that's a project to connect more students to the food cycling process, and it's part of a one phase as part of this larger initiative called the Super Compost Project that's aiming to support all these schools in the Upper Valley in building and sustaining building compost programs that connect to their gardens. It connects to what the kids are eating in the cafeteria, and scaling that project up. Okay, just wanted to offer some examples and some of the work that's been done in the past, and hopefully all of these grants are actually still active right now, so we don't have like reports or outward information to share about them. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of what's happening, and certainly look forward to being able to share more information about these projects as they start to wrap up here in the coming months. These first 2 will both wrap up in June. And the 2023 grants are 2-year grants, so those will conclude in 2025. Okay, so to the nitty-gritty details of the application itself for the Farm to School Vision Grant. Eligible applicants are schools and school districts, registered and/or licensed early child care providers, Vermont licensed after-school programs, and also nonprofits and community organizations, but they must demonstrate partnership in their application, either with a school or early childhood provider or with another organization in the Farm to School and Early Childhood Network. Projects that are not eligible for funding are those that are designed to benefit an organization, business, or industry sector. So the different components of the application are laid out here, and we'll get into this a little bit more towards the end when Diana gives you kind of a preview of the application and web grants and a little tutorial about how to get in there and submit the application. But these are the core components of the application itself. Standard application questions, describing your project team and the different organizations that you're planning to work with, demonstrating the need, so that's connecting to the contemporary problem that your project aims to engage youth in addressing, what the anticipated impact is of the project, your work plan for over the course of the 2-year grant period, a proposed budget with details about how each of those components will fit into achieving the work plan, and then a plan for evaluation for your program to be able to assess success throughout the grant period. When you get into the application in web grants and you're going to start submitting your application, these are some documents that you'll need to have with you prepared to submit before you can hit that submit button. And those are letters of support from each organization partner on the grant project. So for example, if you are proposing to work with a couple different schools on XYZ initiative, you need a letter of support from the principal or the superintendent of each of those schools that you plan to work with as part of your project. And then the other required component is just a standard requirement. You don't have to do this before you get in, but it is something you'll have to upload. And that is the Act 154 Good Standing Certificate. And that's just a standard water quality requirement that your applicant organization just needs to attest that you're not in violation of any water quality rules. So we can kind of cover our bases and make sure that the Agency of Ag isn't supporting projects that have a regulatory impact. Some optional attachments that you might also wish to bring forward within your application is if there's any qualitative or quantitative evidence to articulate the contemporary problem that your project seeks to solve, whether that's racial justice, whether that's nutrition security or agricultural workforce development, providing some documentation around that to just illustrate the problem itself and the need for this type of project. It's an optional attachment there that you can provide in addition to the written descriptions within the application. It's also optional, but there's a component of the application that asks about who's going to be on the project team and asks for their contact information. And there's also an option there to upload resumes, and that can further support one part of the grant scoring is how qualified is the project team to tackle this project. So this can be one way that your team demonstrates that, but again, it's not required. And then if your organization is awarded a Farm to School Vision grant, then after that award goes out, we just want to make sure you're aware these are some of the next things that would be asked in the process. And that is a certificate of insurance listing the Agency of Agriculture as additional insured and a W-9. That will all be explained when we get there, if we get there, but just wanted to provide that up front so that folks are aware. Another component to the grant to be aware of is there is a matching requirement for this grant. The matching requirement is 25%. So, for example, if your organization is requesting a $20,000 grant, then your organization must put forward $5,000 of cash or in-kind contribution from the applicant organization. So that would bring the total project cost to 25,000. So cash match is not a requirement. It can be cash or in-kind or a combination of both. I did also just want to provide some transparency about how applications are scored. So applications are reviewed by a committee, including representatives from the Agency of Ag, Agency of Education, and Department of Health, and also from individuals within the Farm to School and Early Childhood Network. And there's specific scoring criteria that are used for all of these reviewers that are on a committee individually read and review all of the applications that come in. Each reviewer has a few that they're assigned to. They usually don't read every single application, but they score the application based on these various components here: quality of proposal, program purpose, innovation, project sustainability, community engagement, and project team. Those are specific to this grant opportunity. And then within the review meeting, once we have all of the reviews that have come in, we've got the scores that have been averaged out for each proposal. Reviewers can, will decide which ones are going to be funded, and then other considerations will come into play beyond the scoring criteria, such as like what are the mix of projects? Are we reaching students at different age levels? Are we considering the need to distribute funds geographically throughout the state, and the extent to which each project might support vulnerable Vermonters based on the geographic location and any other overlaying factors associated with that. So just wanted to be clear that because there are a couple steps in the review process, and all of this is articulated in a lot of detail within the request for application. So if you haven't gotten in to look at the request for applications yet, I'd highly encourage you to do so. Not only is every single question in the application there, so you can look at that to prepare your application, but there's also all of these important details about how are applications being assessed, how are they scored, how many points gets attributed to each component. And there's also all of the details about like the payment timeline and all of that. A lot of the content for this presentation comes from the request for application. So this webinar will be recorded. I did see a question in the chat about that. It will be recorded, and yes, happy to send it out to individuals that are on this call today, and it'll also be on the website. But also the request for applications has most, if not all, of this information as well, and highly encourage folks to review that in detail before submitting an application. The payment schedule for this grant is it's a 2-year grant period, as I said earlier, and the payment is distributed in three chunks. 45% is provided upfront, right when the grant gets started. 45% is provided about halfway through the grant, and that's after the grantee submits a report and that report is approved. And then the final 10% of funding is released at the end after the project has been complete, the budget's already been fully spent down, and a final report has been submitted and approved. So we just cruised through most of the content for this presentation in 26 minutes here, so we've got lots of time for going through the tutorial and asking questions, but just wanted to kind of summarize what are the next steps to applying. So you can visit the grant webpage, which is listed here. Resources that you'll find there that are important to review are the request for applications. That contains all the details you need to know about this grant. There's also a link to web grants, which is where applications will be submitted. There's also the web grants application guide, which Diana will show later on, but it'll always be there for you as well. And then this webinar recording will also be there. So these are your resources to help you work through the application. And we will talk through the components of the application today. But if you do not yet have a Web Grants account, make sure you do that as soon as possible, because you don't want to wait until a couple days before the deadline for that, because you won't actually get access to Web Grants until that registration has been manually approved on our end. So be sure to submit your registration now if you don't already have a Web Grants account, and because it could take 1 to 2 business days for you to then have an account created and then be able to have access to log in and submit an application or start an application, really. So, and the application deadline is Thursday, October 11th, not October, April 11th. Sorry. All right. That's all that I have. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Diana to give you a tour into Web Grants.
Thanks so much, Gina. So as Gina said, I'm Diana Ferguson. I work kind of on the back end of the grant making for our agricultural development division. And so I've interacted with some of you already. And so some of you will be familiar with the system, and this will just be a refresher. And for others, it may be brand new. So I will say, while I'm pulling up my screen here, that Web Grants is a system that does have a little bit of a learning curve. So if you haven't been in the system before and you are planning to apply, it's good to take some time to get familiar with the navigation, just to make it easier once you get to the point of actually being ready to complete and submit your application. So hopefully my demo will help you with that a little bit today. Okay, Gina, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Can you still see it now?
We now see kids in a sleigh, which is a
Oh,
beautiful
well,
sight
that's
as
not what
well.
I was trying to do. Let me let me try that again. Okay, how about now?
There it is. Yep.
Okay, great. So as Gina mentioned, if you haven't already registered, please do that. And you can have multiple folks working on an application. So if you have colleagues or volunteers or other people who you'd like to have access to your application, please have them register and create their own account in Web Grants. And that's so if somebody needs support, we know who to contact and the right way to reach them. This is the home page or the login page for Web Grants. You can see there's a forgot user ID and password link here below, and the register button is the yellow one here towards the bottom left. So those use those if you need them. And once you have your account, you'll get an automated email with your username and password. Then you can enter them here to log in. Actually, I'm going to use a different account for the purposes of this little demo. So I'll walk you through, once you log in, how to access the Vision Grant application. And we won't go through every single question, but I'll at least show you how to get to where you need to be. So once you log in, you will find this dashboard. It will say work assignment at the top. That's essentially once you are a grantee, if you have things coming up that are due. So you can disregard that, but you should have your name up here in the top left corner. And a quick note, if you have an old Web Grants account, or if you have registered and you need to change any information, email, address, phone, things like that, you can go down here toward the bottom left where it says My Profile. And once you click on that, it will take you to your profile and contact information and the organization you're associated with. So you can click Edit My Profile and save if anything changes, and make sure to do that if that's the case, so that we can get in touch with you with the right contact if needed. So over here on the left are these gray navigational buttons, which are your primary tools to get from point A to B in the system. To get to the actual application, you'll click on Funding Opportunities, and that will load a page with all of the open funding opportunities that are currently accepting applications through our division. So you'll see multiple of them, and you can, of course, go right to Farm to School Vision Grant and click anywhere in the highlighted bar. And this will take you to a landing page for the funding opportunity where it gives you the basics, the contact information, deadline, and just a few pieces of information kind of at the overview level. But of course, the request for applications is also attached at the bottom and links to our website. So that's just a nice quick tool in case you need it. But of course, everything you need is also in the document of the request for applications itself. So to start an application, you'll click this green Start New Application button. And if you've already started one, it will show up here in this bar and you can open it to re-edit it. So Start New Application, this green button right here is just taking a second. So what this will do is take you through a 3-step application wizard, which will really just build the structure of your application on the back end before you can then complete the forms themselves. So you'll give your application a name, whatever you would like it to be. That's a little bit descriptive, but not too long. And then just confirm that your name is the one showing up here in the contact bar, and then click Save Form Information at the top right, which is just something to know. The green button at the top right is generally the tool in Web Grants to unlock whatever the next step may be. So that's just something to know. So this is a little bit redundant, but you've got your project title, then you're going to confirm that your organization is correctly selected. Some people are associated with multiple agencies, and so it's helpful just to make sure that your organization is reflected accurately, and then you're going to save the form again. And then the last step is optional in this 3-step wizard, which is to add your additional contacts. Like I said in the beginning, if there's anybody from your organization that you'd like to work with you on the application and they're already registered in Web Grants, they should show up here when you click into the additional applicants box, and you can select their name. And then at that point, save form information again. If you're just working by yourself, you can skip that step altogether and just save. And that will take you to the application details menu. And what you have here is a list of all of the application forms that need to be completed before you can submit the application. So the general information form you'll see is already complete. That is what the system has just generated from the wizard you did. And so you don't need to edit that again. You can go to the forms in any order, but I'll start with the standard application questions. This is a new form that our division is using for all grants that people apply for. So some of the questions may not be 100% pertinent to you, but just be aware that they are standardized. So just answer them to the best of your ability. Anything in red with an asterisk is a required question, and anything in black text is optional. So go through the form, answer the questions as you would, and then at any point, whether or not you have finished the form you're on, you can click Save Form, this button at the top right, and that will save your information. You can walk away and come back. You can log in, log out as many times as you need to. And once you click Save Form, you'll be in this kind of view only mode where you can see your responses. And so to re-edit, again, you can then click Edit Form. And then you'll see these buttons are repeated as you scroll down. These are just different sections of the same form. So, but when you click Edit or Save Form, it edits or saves the entire form. So the button is repeated, but it does the exact same thing. And then once you feel like, okay, I've edited this form multiple times, I feel totally good about it, and I don't need to come back to it, then you can click the orange button that says Mark as complete. And it's telling me I can't actually mark it as complete because I haven't finished this form, so it will give you this error message if any of the questions are missing responses. But once everything is done in a particular form, it will allow you to mark as complete, which is telling the system that you're done with that form and you're ready to move on. However, even if you have marked it as complete, you can still come back and edit the form at any point before you have submitted the application. So when you're ready to move to the next form, you can either click the back button here on the top left. That's sometimes more reliable than the back button of your internet browser, or you can see these blue little abbreviated hyperlinks in the middle, and those actually take you to the forms in the same list. So rather than go back and forth, you can just say, okay, I'm done with standard application questions. I'm ready to go to the next form, which is project team and organization partners. And you can just click right through. And like I said, edit them in any order that you feel comfortable with. So most of the forms have a similar layout. You have the questions, you have multiple sections, you have the ability to edit and save. This one allows you to start editing without having to click the edit button. There's a table here where there's no data, but there's the tables are edited a little bit differently. So sometimes it takes a little of finagling to figure out, okay, if I'm in this edit mode, I can edit the questions. As you can see, I'm going to answer a question here, and it looks like I can't edit this table. There's nothing for me to do. But if I have edited the text up here and then I click Save Form, which takes you to the sort of view only mode that I talked about, then at that point, your text is saved, and now the table is able to be edited in the view only mode, which is a little bit counterintuitive. So again, there's a learning curve here. So when your text is saved up top and you're not in editing mode, the tables now have this button that allows you to click add row. And that's how you enter your information for your organization partners, your project team, and there's a few tables throughout the application. So that's just something to know. The table is edited one row at a time, so it gives you all of the fields that you need to complete one row of the table. You enter your information, click Save Row, and then when you go back to the table, that information will be saved, and then you can click Add Row again to add your next partner or whatever it may be. So with that, let's see, budget. I'll just point out this water quality certification form. It is just a requirement through Agency of Natural Resources for every state of Vermont grant applicant that you certify that you are in compliance with state water quality standards and that you are you're not under current violation. And so you can simply say yes or no. Hopefully everyone is yes, and then you will download and complete the certification form and attach it here, which is just certifying the same thing. So the attachment process is that you select a file, it allows you to select a file from your computer. There is no upload button, but when you have selected a file and clicked on a file from your computer, the name of the file will show up in this white box. And then when you click Save Form, the green button, it will upload for you. So even though there's no actual feature showing you that it is uploading, once you select the file and save it, then you're good to go. Okay, so I'll go back to my application menu. And to do that, if you get in kind of a loop, you can always click on App List, which is this first blue link here in the hyperlinks, and App List is taking you to the application menu where we had first arrived. So you can see when you've last edited the form. Once you've marked as complete the forms that you're done with, you'll get a green check mark right here. And once you've got green check marks all the way down the line and you're totally done, this red bar will change from saying application is incomplete to saying application is in compliance and can be submitted. And at that point, you'll have an orange submit button pop up here towards the top right next to the preview button. And so you can submit at that point. And you can preview your application, which is a nice thing to be able to see every form together rather than having to open every form one at a time. So when you're ready to do your proofreading, it's nice to use the preview feature because then you can see it all on one page. So that's handy. So once you have submitted the application, at that point, it comes over to our end and you can no longer edit it. If you later realize, oh, I uploaded the wrong attachment or something like that, and it's still before the application deadline, then please reach out to me and I can open it back up for you if you get into a pinch of that nature. That's not something we can do after the deadline, but just so you know. And I will point out this web grants application guide. I'll put the I'll put the link in the chat here in a moment. This is on our agency website, and it's a step-by-step guide for how to complete an application with screenshots. And so it basically takes you through everything that I just did, but in sort of this static form. So you and or anyone else who may be working on the application can walk through it if you need a reminder of how to get from one step to the next. So I think that's the bulk of how to get to and through an application in web grants. I won't go through every single application form, but as you all likely know, the request for applications does have all of the application questions as they appear in web grants. So it can be really handy. Some folks find that in reviewing the RFA, they like to type up their responses to each question and save them in a Word document. And then when you get closer to being done with your application, you can then just sort of copy and paste your responses into web grants. And the reason for that, it's totally optional, but some people find it helpful because then it just reduces the number of times that you have to log in and out of web grants, knowing you might be editing it multiple times anyway. And that helps with collaborating with others too. It's easier to do that outside of web grants sometimes. So also, every now and then there's a glitch or something funny if you are in the system working on an application and something looks incorrect or you're not able to proceed even with help from the application guide. And thanks, Gina, for sharing the link to that. If that's the case, then please call me or email me. I'm in the system all the time and I'm happy to do troubleshooting with you if you need that. And thanks, Gina, for sharing those links there. So basically, that's sort of the quick version of how to do what you need to do as an applicant. And feel free to reach out if you need anything, and I'll hand it back to you, Gina.
Thanks so much, Diana. That was really helpful. And yeah, Catherine had asked a question earlier in the chat about, do you suggest multiple users each have their own login? And I said yes. For each organization, it's pretty standard to have a couple different accounts in web grants. Usually there's someone who's writing the application, someone else who's if the grant is awarded, for example, someone else might be responsible for submitting reports and somebody else might be responsible for submitting claims for payment to get those grant payments distributed. So it's pretty normal to have multiple accounts per organization. So yes, if there are multiple folks at your team that are going to be working on getting into web grants, we do recommend that each person has their own login and registers early to make that happen. So that's the end of our presentation. I did link in the chat, like Diana mentioned, there's the application guide, which is that visual step-by-step demonstration of those steps that Diana walked us through in the presentation today. And then I also just offered the link to the website, which I'm sure most folks already have, but I did mention in the presentation that on that website, you have the request for applications, you have the application guide, and you also you'll have the link to this recording once it's up on YouTube. So with all of that, this is like not super, maybe not really important. I've been, I don't know if it makes sense to share or not, but I'm just gonna offer it. So this is the report that we prepared for the Vermont State Legislature about all of our grant programs this past year. So if you're interested in learning more about the other two grants that closed earlier in the year, there's some helpful history and context in here. And also I put up on the screen, those 5 projects that were funded with the Vision Grant last year. And there's a little more detail about each of those on page 9 as well. So just wanted to give that high level program information if anyone's interested in learning more about the grant history. And there's more grant history on the Farm to School webpage as well under the grant history tab. So how about any questions? Does anyone have any questions at this point? Just raise your hand or raise your hand and so Katrina, I see your hand up, so I'm gonna enable your mic and then you will have to unmute on your end.
Thanks. I've got a question about letters of support. If we
Yeah.
have a project that is with multiple schools in a district or a supervisory union, would it be sufficient to have a letter of support from that district or larger body, or would you prefer from each school that's participating?
Good question. My sense is that it would be okay to have just a letter from the supervisory union level. But I do know that the way that the application is structured is that in that table that Diana was showing us, that first table, for each row, you describe the organization, the number of students, and the letter of support gets uploaded right there into that table. So if you have multiple schools within one school district, like, I guess it depends on what's going to be feasible. Like, for example, if there are just 3 schools in the school district and you have unique relationships with each one, then you could get a letter of support from each of those schools. But if you're working like with 5 or 6 different schools within a supervisory union, or you're working with multiple supervisory unions, then I think you could just have one letter of support for the supervisory union and upload it multiple times, if there are a lot of individual schools within that supervisory union that you're working with. How does that sound, Katrina?
That sounds workable, and I'll take a closer look at how it's structured in web grants and see if I have any other questions. But I think we can
Okay.
make that work. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions? Again, feel free to raise your hand or also type into the chat. I'll just share in case folks aren't tracking the chat. A couple folks asked for the link to the recording. So again, I'll put that up on the grant webpage. And I can also send it directly to the list of folks registered for this webinar. Brooke Small from the Champlain Valley Coalition, Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition asked if they could apply or would be eligible to apply for another grant. And the answer is yes, there's no restrictions around that, but projects should be distinct from what was previously funded. And I think that's all of them. Oh, Catherine has her hand up, so let me allow your mic, Catherine. Now you just unmute.
Okay, thank you both. This has been really informative. My question is about, I'm going to go to the RFA so I can read it verbatim, about the high net impact score.
Mm-hmm.
And, defined generally as the number of youth impacted multiplied by the magnitude of the impact per individual. Can you maybe explain a little bit more on what you mean by magnitude and how we would calculate that? Are you looking for a number?
Yeah. This is a good question. From what I recall is that these are, I don't think those are application questions, are they, Catherine? I think those are review questions.
Those are in the overview and eligibility section.
Yep.
The
So yeah, I think what we have done in the past for that is we have a couple questions in the review form that there's a question in the review form that asks like on a scale from 1 to 5, how significant is the impact? Do you as a grant reviewer perceive the impact that this will have on each individual youth that's engaged? And then you as the applicant give us the number of students that will be reached or youths that will be reached through the project. And so the net impact score is a combination of those two numbers. So it's the number of youths reached times whatever the average reviewer score is for perceived impact on each youth involved.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. And that's part of the assessment in the scoring criteria around like measuring and assessing project impact.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Any other questions? Okay. Not hearing any others, I think we'll wrap this webinar up a little bit early. Thank you all for being here, and I guess maybe what we can do is drop our. Would you mind dropping your email in the chat, Diana? I'll drop mine in as well. So feel free to reach out to either one of us with any questions. And yeah, best of luck as you put together your application. And again, as folks probably generally are aware, that it's best to ask questions early because we might not be available to assist or address questions, as we get down to the last couple of days of the application window. All right. Well, thanks all. Thank you, Diana. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks all. Bye-bye.